All right, Margie, you're all set.
Okay, thank you. Good evening and welcome. My name is Margie Gator, a member of the League of Women Voters of North and Central San Mateo County. I will be your moderator for the Burlingame City Council Candidate Forum. Thank you to the City of Burlingame for sponsoring this forum tonight. Virtual candidate forums have some unique features, but we've designed a process for using conferencing apps to give everyone a good experience and follow the League's long-standing and well-received processes. There is a host timekeeper and a moderator for this candidate forum. The timekeeper tonight is Carolyn Belknap, and she is responsible for timing the candidate responses. Video for the audience is turned off by default. The only video that is enabled is for the candidates, the moderator, and the timekeeper. Carolyn's also, we've set up the conferencing app so that you are automatically muted. This is to allow the candidates to speak without interruption. We urge everyone to submit questions. You can do that by sending an email to questions@lwvncsmc.org. Carolyn's holding it up right there. The candidates have agreed that no campaign literature, including campaign promoting backgrounds, are permitted in this meeting. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization, and our purpose is to promote active and informed participation in government. We welcome people of all genders. We appreciate the interest and efforts of groups like the Burlingame City Council in presenting events that increase voters' knowledge about the candidates and issues. The purpose of a candidate forum is to provide an opportunity for all the candidates to be heard at one time and to be questioned by you, the audience. We hope that bringing the candidates and voters together face to face, voters will be better informed and will make good decisions when they vote. We appreciate your interest in coming out to learn more about the candidates. Tonight, you will hear from the candidates for the Burlingame City Council. Burlingame recently transitioned to district elections. This means candidates are now elected by district instead of at large. There is one candidate for one seat in District 1, one candidate for one seat in District 3, and one candidate for one seat in District 5. The term of office for all the districts is 4 years. The candidates by district are Ricardo Ortiz in District 1, Michael Brownrigg in District 3, and Peter Stevenson in District 5. Rachel Sear filed to run in District 5 and then announced after the filing period on social media, and she gave a statement to the Daily Journal to withdraw. So she remains on the ballot, but she is not here at the candidate forum because she says she's not running anymore. The rules of the forum are as follows. Opening statements, each candidate will have 3 minutes for an opening statement. Then we'll move on to the question period, and during the question period, each candidate will have 1 minute to answer. All candidates will have equal time to speak to the question, even if the question is addressed to only one candidate. And then we'll have closing statements, and those will be 2 minutes each. Our timekeeper again is Carolyn Belknap. And again, if you have questions, you can send them to questions@lwvncsmc.org. All the questions come to the moderator, and I will sort the questions by by subject and cover a variety of topics. We seldom have time to ask all the questions, and I might rephrase or combine questions at times. So now it's time for the opening statements. The candidates have drawn lots to determine the order in which they will speak. Each candidate has 3 minutes for the opening statement, and our first candidate is Ricardo Ortiz.
Thank you, Margie, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this event. My name is Ricardo Ortiz. I'm currently the mayor, and I have served, I am in my 9th year as on the Burlingame City Council. I moved to Burlingame 29 years ago, right when my wife was pregnant with our oldest son. And initially we lived on Oak Grove near McKinley School. Our house has since been torn down as a 3-story condominium building. Got involved in politics through Rosalie O'Mahony, who was my teacher up at CSM, and then she ran here for many years. And I believe in keeping Burlingame a great place to live. And the way we do this is by guiding Burlingame through the inevitable change that it's going through. We're not going to stop the change. We just have the ability to guide it and make sure the city continues to be a great place to live. We do that by protecting our neighborhoods and commercial areas, and also by working with our school district to make sure that our schools are top quality. We have been able to create lots of new housing to address the housing shortage. We have 2,500 new units being built, of which 362 are below market rent. And again, we've done that while protecting our traditional neighborhoods. We have had a long tradition of being very fiscally responsible, which has made it easy for us, not easy, but manageable for us to get through the pandemic. And I think that we should continue this, and I hope to do that in the next few years. Burlingame remains an excellent place to live, and I welcome the opportunity to continue to guide the city in the next 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next opening statement is Peter Stevenson.
Thank you, Margie, and thank you, Carolyn, and thank you to the League of Women Voters. Hello, everyone. My name's Peter Stevenson. I moved to Burlingame about 30 years ago into the Lion Hove District 5 area, and proud to say that I still live there, and we have not moved, but have expanded the house to accommodate our growing family. I agree with Ricardo that Burlingame is an amazing community, an amazing place, but change is certainly inevitable. And much of what we do is how we help guide and influence that change to be the best possible outcome for all residents. Personally, I've been involved in community service all my life, whether it was helping to start recycling and ride-sharing programs when I was younger, whether it was my time volunteering around healthcare overseas in Africa and Nepal, whether it was my time supporting our public schools here in Burlingame as president of BCE, as well as the PTA president for BIS, been active also in youth and community sports, and most recently was involved in helping to raise campaign or capital funds for the new community center here in Burlingame, which opened earlier this summer. Personally, I stand for clean, safe neighborhoods, a rational approach to traffic and affordable housing. Certainly partnerships with our schools. I don't believe that's a public or private. I think our responsibility as a city is to promote and support our schools overall, regardless of what affiliation they have. I certainly support our business community as well. They're a vital part of our community and our experience as residents. I also recognize that we have a changing demographic and population where a significant number of people that live in Burlingame are over the age of 60. So access for seniors, the disabled is important. And finally, I'm a pretty rational person. I'm fact-driven, and I think it's incumbent on all council members to support a fiscal responsible approach to how we support our community and how we progress into the future. Overall, I'm honored to be running for Burlingame City Council in District 5, and I appreciate your support.
Thank you. And our last opening statement is Michael Brownrigg. Oop, you're on mute. And we'll restart your clock. Oh,
Thank
there
you.
you go.
Okay, after 2 years and a half of Zoom, you'd think I'd figure that out. Thank you very much to the League for pulling us all together. Thank you to the public for being here this evening. I will try to be brief, but my colleagues will tell you that's a challenge for me sometimes. I have a background in public service. I started as a U.S. diplomat. I served this country around the world. The last 25 years, I've been in finance. Most recently establishing a fund to close the racial wealth gap in the United States. And I think that those two attributes have been very helpful to me on city council, but being both financially literate, but also a diplomat. And I really value the civility that we have on the Burlingame City Council. I think it helps us get a lot more done than most cities or many cities of our size. everyone can delineate what makes Burlingame special for them. It might be the parks, it might be the safe streets, it might be our great schools, it might be our beautiful downtown that's a destination for people around the peninsula. But for me, what I love about Burlingame and why we chose to live here is because it feels like a real town. It feels like a town of both people with wealth and people who are blue collar, people who are raising kids, people who are retiring here. And that sense of community and diversity and a blue collar kid going to school with a white collar kid, everybody getting along and working hard to achieve the American dream is what I think makes Burlingame special. And it's one of the things we have to work on so hard to keep. I do think both my colleagues have talked about the importance of fiscal responsibility. I've helped manage the city through two downturns, the Great Recession in 08-09, and we managed to not close the Easton Library, and then most recently in COVID. And just to put COVID in perspective, we are a city that has about a $70 million general fund. That's what pays for police and fire and sidewalks and trees. And we lost over 2 years, almost $32 million in income. And yet we managed through this crisis without laying anybody off, without our residents seeing a diminution in the quality of service. That's really important. Knowing that we have great streets, safe streets, great trees and parks is part of what makes Burlingame so special, and we need to protect that. I'm also proud of the affordable housing we have in our downtown, 132 units that we have put on a formerly public parking lot to provide housing for people that make only half of the area median income. So we're doing our part. We have challenges ahead. I look forward very much to working with both Peter and the mayor on the challenges, which I would list as making sure we get the Broadway grade separation done, which is a huge fiscal lift, to make sure we keep our parks and open space the way they are. I'd like to work on mobility and help build a much more robust shuttle system for our residents and our visitors. And finally, we need to make sure that El Camino Real is improved and made safe for pedestrians and motorists. Thank you.
Thank you. Now it's time to move on to the question period. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer the question. I'll vary the order in which the candidates are called on to speak. And if a question is addressed to a specific candidate, that candidate will answer first, and the others will also have a chance to respond. My first question is, tell us how your experience living in Burlingame has helped you understand the local issues that are important to its residents. Why do you feel you are best equipped to respond to those issues and direct improvements? I'll repeat. Tell us how your experience living in Burlingame has helped you to understand the local issues that are most important to its residents. And why do you feel you are best equipped to respond to those issues and direct improvements? And we will start with Michael Brownwig. Oh, you're on mute again. Come back.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think my intro touched a little bit on this. I've been here, I've raised my family here, and I think been part of the public school system from the get-go. And, as just a resident of a town of 30,000 people, we all get around and we listen and we hear and we see the problems with sidewalks. We understand the challenges with growth and traffic. And I don't know that I'm the best person to deal with these, but I do think I have a record of achievement. I think this council has been incredibly productive. I'm always careful to say we, because council is a we thing, not an I thing. But I think we've gotten a great deal done. If you look at our downtown sidewalks, if you look at the town square that's coming up, if you look at some of the amenities that we've been able to build, our new community center, I'm proud of the record of achievement that we have. And I think that helps me guide the city going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And next is Ricardo Ortiz.
Thank you. I think we've all been in town for a long, long time, but I think you guys beat me. So, but it is, we've been here for a long time. We've raised our children here. We've dealt with the schools, with the rec department, with everything. But for me personally, our first house on Oak Grove, we left it because there was a developer who wanted to buy it and develop it. So I kind of suffered the development blues when we were forced to. It was a beautiful little house in a great neighborhood. And then we found Bray Park, and it's also a great neighborhood. But I got the sense of dealing with the planning commission of how inevitable that change is, and how sometimes you just have to bow your head and understand that that's going to happen and move along. Am I the best person to address this? I think that I have a pretty good understanding. As Michael said, we've achieved quite a bit and as a group. And I think that I've been very good about listening and bringing people's thoughts forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And next is Peter Stevenson.
Yeah, I think, to me, understanding is a formula of two things. One, it's being involved and taking the time to care and listen to what's going on. And I certainly think my time here in Burlingame points to my involvement in a lot of different aspects of our community. And regardless of running for council or not, I would continue that. So I think, by listening and being part of the community, these are, important tenets to understand the issues that people feel most passionate about. In fact, most recently on a precinct walk, I reached out to about 150 different neighbors and, took a survey process to understand some of the elements that are important to them, some of which are very localized, frankly. And it's important not to, overshoot that or underestimate that. Am I the best person? Probably not, but I'm involved, and I'll certainly do my best to support the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question is about housing, and we have a couple questions about housing. Affordable housing specifically. The Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or RHNA 5, is just ending with all the cities in San Mateo County not meeting their goals. RHNA 6 is mandating more than 3 times affordable housing units in the next 8 years. What ideas do you have to meet the number of affordable housing units that will be required in Burlingame? So RHNA 5 is ending and nobody met their goals. RHNA 6 is mandating even more affordable housing. What ideas do you have to meet the number of affordable housing units which will be required in Burlingame? And we will start with Ricardo Ortiz.
Okay, I think beyond just ideas, we have taken action. We have rezoned a good portion of the city in the north end of the city, close to transportation, and is going from a light industrial neighborhood to a residential neighborhood. We, like I said earlier, we have approximately 2,589 units that have been approved, of which 362 are below market rent. We have thought outside of the box. We have done many different things, including the housing that we created downtown, which is 136 units of affordable housing. We're well on our way to meet our RHNA allocation. So I'm very proud of what we've done.
Thank you. And next is Peter Stevenson.
Thanks, Margie. I think the approach to housing, and it's probably not overly unique just to Burlingame, is really taking a holistic approach. We have to look not only at zoning, but we have to look at, the high density opportunities near transportation, as Ricardo just mentioned. I know that overall there's this question of affordability, but affordability is frankly a formula at a state level, which doesn't necessarily match everybody in our community. So we need to be very sensitive to what will work and how we address that. I'm a big proponent of kind of sustainable mobility and looking at that density of housing in areas that doesn't necessarily equate to other demands on the city from a traffic or transportation side.
Thank you. And finally, Michael Brownrigg.
Thank you. This gets to what I was starting with, which is we need to make a decision that we want to remain an inclusive community, which we have been for 100 years. For 100 years, we have been a mix of rich San Franciscans coming down here and building big homes, and then regular people building bungalows and being merchants and repairmen and bankers and whatnot. And we have always been that community, and I want to make sure we stay that community. So I'm exceptionally proud of the council's general plan that we worked on with the community a couple of years ago. Ricardo alluded to it, but to take almost half of our commercial industrial district over on Rollins Road and permit high density housing to go there was a bold step. And it was not a step that was forced down our throat by Sacramento. It was a step we decided to take because we thought that was the right way for our community to evolve. We don't want to have stuff shoehorned into single family home neighborhoods. We don't think that's the best way to grow, but we do think growth is good, that growth provides opportunities for people for starter homes. And do everything I can to keep that going.
Thank you. Okay, our next question, similar vein. How would you appeal to the Association of Bay Area Governments, ABAG, and Housing and Community Development regarding the impacts of high-density residential construction in Burlingame? In particular, the impacts to public safety, evacuation, medical access, public utilities, and schools. So how would you appeal to the Association of Bay Area Governments and Housing and Community Development regarding the impacts of high-density construction in Burlingame, and in particular, the impact of high-density construction to public safety, evacuation, medical access, public utilities, and schools? And we will start with Peter Stevenson.
Yeah, so in terms of schools, I've had conversations with the public side of the equation with school board, and we certainly have capacity right now within our district for at least another 20% growth without major capital issues. But I think in terms of ABAG, my approach is essentially, we have to be involved and represented, but we also should look at that as a source of ideas and inspiration for what we might be able to apply here appropriately within Burlingame. I think Michael and Ricardo are correct that we've taken some bold steps to be out in front of some of the housing crisis and some of the areas like transportation and safety. And I certainly would support continuing that, but I think being active within ABAG is important.
Thank you. And next is Ricardo Ortiz.
Great, thank you. I agree with Peter. We have to remain active in our regional boards, not only ABAG, but MTC, CCAG, and others where we have a lot of representation. To talk about our development and the impact on schools, I agree with Peter that we still have some capacity, and when push comes to shove, we will work with the school to increase that capacity. As far as public safety, I believe that at this point, we do not have any sort of spike in crime, and we don't expect that will happen, but we will increase, according to our needs, we will increase our police and fire. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Michael Brownrigg.
So I will gently say I disagree with the premise of the question that if you have multifamily housing with young families living there, that you're going to have all of these problems. We studied the limits and constraints on Burlingame water, infrastructure, schools, safety. There are no impacts in the growth plan that we've created. I think it was smart for us to put the density near a major transit hub that has both Caltrain and BART. And all you have to do is look at Mission Bay and Dogpatch to see what can happen when you create smaller units for younger people to come in. And Burlingame has always had its share of starter homes and so forth. I want to repeat that I think what makes our community special is that we are a mix of economic backgrounds. And if you care about the American dream and you care about giving kids from less advantageous backgrounds a shot, then you help those kids go to our great public schools. You help those families live in our great public streets. Live with great public streets and safe streets. So, again, for me, this is a passion.
Thank you. The next question is, this resident believes that everyone needs access to inviting outdoor recreation areas. There are several projects in the city to provide much needed additional housing, but many of them are on the far edges of neighborhood spaces or in former industrial or commercial areas. How would you assure that these new housing units also have good access to parks and children's playgrounds, which are often not near these projects? So I'll repeat, this resident feels that everyone should have some access to outdoor recreation. There are several projects in the city that provide much needed housing, but many of them are on the edges of neighborhood spaces or in former industrial or commercial areas. How will you assure that these new housing units also have good access to parks and playgrounds, which are often not near these new projects? And first is Michael Brownrigg.
So I think that's a critical question and one that we care deeply about. So we created a working group of 2 council members and members of the public and outside experts exactly to answer the question, if we're going to create a whole new neighborhood on Rollins Road, how do we make sure it feels as good as every other neighborhood in Burlingame? And that's really important to us. We will look at ways of beautifying the street, of narrowing it, of making it more bike and pedestrian friendly. We have ideas about how to create great public open space, which I agree is part of what makes a neighborhood. We want to make sure there are amenities. I'd like to make sure there's a supermarket there or some access to fresh food. I'd like to see a civic sort resource, like maybe a branch library. These are things we can work on together, but the questioner is absolutely right to put his or her finger on this as a critical issue to make sure we create a great neighborhood for Burlingame.
Thank you. And next is Peter Stevenson.
Yeah, I echo a lot of what Michael just said. I think it's incumbent on the council to support and drive, working with the developers, working with the different constituents to have a master plan that encompasses all aspects of our community and our life, not just schools and utilities and things like that, but also our recreational facilities, our commercial zones that help support those so that, you know, one, we're not necessarily jumping in cars to get somewhere just because we're located now on the northern edge of Burlingame and the Rollins Road area, but also just, you know, that we have adequate open space. I look at some of the developments even in San Francisco where they've done better than average jobs of actually thinking about that. And I certainly would look to try to continue that thinking as it relates to the council role.
Thank you. And finally, Ricardo Ortiz.
Thank you. I'm not going to try to repeat everything that's been said. It is a fear when we've changed the zoning to multifamily in that part of the town that we create this big concrete jungle. And I think that it's important that we do it, that we be careful of that in 2 ways. Number one, every time one of the developments goes up, we need to require that they have a lot of green space. 2 of the developments that we have going on right there have significant green space that I think will make the neighborhood look a little warmer. And in addition, we do have our subcommittee working on other ways to make it a more attractive neighborhood. But it is a challenge creating a neighborhood from an industrial area. And I think we're meeting it by both private and public involvement. Thank you.
Thank you. And speaking of children, I have a few questions from some of your more engaged youth in Burlingame. The first one is, over the last several years, I know, I love it. Over the last several years, Burlingame High School has been the site of multiple hate crimes. These incidents alienate students and generate fear. What actions would you take to ensure that Burlingame is a place where hate is not tolerated, and how would you make all residents feel like they belong? So over the last few years, Burlingame High School has been the site of multiple hate crimes. These incidents alienate students and generate fear. What actions would you take to ensure that Burlingame is a place where hate is not tolerated, and how would you make all residents feel they belong? And on this, we start with Ricardo Ortiz.
Thank you. That's just such a difficult issue because it all begins with education and education at home. Through the city, we're going to provide law enforcement to protect against the laws that are broken. But we're going to work together with our school partners to teach and expose these people to different ethnicities, different minorities, so that as they grow up, it's not lost on them that we all can live together and we all need to live together. But it starts at home, it starts with the schools, it's education, and it's being exposed to the different ethnic groups. I think that's how we would approach it. Thank you.
Thank you. And next is Michael Brownwig.
Thank you. It's a really important question, and I appreciate being asked. It starts really with all of us, first of all. When we see an aggression, we need to all speak up. We know it when we see it. We need to stick together and help. The city, I am proud of, I know this sounds maybe a little bit out of left field. I'm very proud of a public art installation that we made very near BHS that honors Anson Burlingame and his values of tolerance and mutual respect and equality. And we quote various civil rights leaders about the importance of mutual respect and equality. I think this is another reason why I'm proud that our council itself is a civil council. We don't get involved in food fights. People don't call each other names. Those of us who are actually grown-ups in the room, we need to model grown-up behavior. That did not happen out of our White House for many years, and we're all suffering as a result of that.
Thank you. And finally, Peter Stevenson.
Making sure I'm not on
There you
mute. Okay, thank you, Marty. Getting with the protocol. It is an important question. I know far too many youth in our high school age group and middle school age group. I was PTA president for BIS, so I understand some of the challenges, and sometimes the crimes aren't necessarily as significant as a hate crime. Sometimes they're just simple bullying, and what that leads to emotionally. So from a city perspective, I'm very supportive of the schools in helping to figure out how to make that the best experience overall for our kids and prepare them. I do think it's important to model behavior from an adult standpoint and within the home, but that's not always possible. So, I think my pledge would be to figure out how we could partner better with those schools, whether it's police presence, whether it's counseling, whether it's other types of services that the city might do to help support that experience of our kids.
Thank you. Another question is, climate change is a key concern for youth voters. What specific plans do you have to improve Burlingame's sustainability? Climate change is a key concern for the youth voters. What specific plans do you have to improve Burlingame's sustainability? And we will start with Ricardo Ortiz.
Well, thank you. Again, very important question. A few years ago, we were asked to add staff to include a sustainability coordinator. And man, we are so glad that we have done that. She has come around and done many, many initiatives. And I'm proud to say that one of the things that we've done recently is a net zero building for our new community center. And we do have work with our county and our neighboring cities on many other initiatives to ensure that we're meeting our climate goals. And then on a personal note, I think it's important that we all do our own part, just as the city is doing its part. And so I encourage everybody to just look at what their own practices are and make sure that we all take steps, because every little drop helps in the big bucket. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, next is Peter Stevenson.
Yeah.
Not fine.
I studied environmental sciences and issues, ecosystems as an undergrad. It's been something that is important to me and has led to decisions that I've done around my own household, as well as part of the community, whether it's recycling and some of the ride sharing aspects. But my vision for Burlingame is that we're leading the charge, and I'm not saying we aren't already, because I think, to Ricardo's point, we've done a lot to be out in front. But I would love for us to formalize a sustainability position within the city structure, where it's not necessarily a full-time but near full-time role. There are programs that are emerging out of Stanford and other university campuses where they're actually now teaching students sustainability. It's literally a major and a school at these elements. So I think it's important for cities to take the charge. And certainly we're doing some of those things already, but I'd like to see us do more.
Thank you. And finally, Michael Brownrigg.
Thank you. Our city is committed to doing its part. We recently adopted codes that'll make sure that all new buildings are all electric. So we're trying to reduce the amount of natural gas and petrochemicals that get used. We're moving our fleet to be all electric as vehicles age out. And I'm particularly proud that Burlingame was one of the pioneers, signatories to Peninsula Clean Energy, on which our colleague Donna Colson serves in an important role. And PCE is all about creating a green energy grid. And so if this question happened to come from some of the youth, I would suggest ask your parents, are you guys 50% green energy or 100%? Because you can toggle that number and you can buy more green energy and make sure your entire household is getting its electrons from renewable resources rather than petrochemicals. There's always more to do and more we can do, but I'm proud of the steps we've taken so far.
Great, thank you. And maybe this isn't as much of an issue in Burlingame as other places, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Social media is increasingly being used as a means of communications to constituents. How would you use this resource to increase transparency? And if you see your supporters behaving badly on, say, Nextdoor, would you intervene to try to raise the level of conversation? Social media is being used as a main means of communications with your constituents. How do you use this resource to increase transparency? And if you see your supporters behaving badly, would you intervene to try to raise the level of conversation? And we will start with Peter Stevenson.
Yeah, my kids teach me a lot about social media, and I'm, there's a lot of good that could come out of social media. There's a lot of risks and downside as well. So I think it's incumbent. I would absolutely intervene as it relates to the role of the council and making sure that, we bring facts, we bring education into the conversation, that it's not just emotion. And so I certainly would do that. And I've done that in the past, whether it's being routed through social media or whether it's being kind of word of mouth across the community. I think it's really important. And it is a mean for communication, but it shouldn't be the only means for communication.
Thank you. And next is Ricardo Ortiz.
Thank you. I think it is an important means of communication. I think that that's a way to reach a lot of people in a short period of time. But so I have not had the opportunity to have any of my supporters say or do anything online that required me get involved, but I absolutely would. We have taken steps in the city with some of the things that were said on Nextdoor. We're trying to debunk some of the things that were said, and we have it on our website. I forget what the title is, but it's like debunking the myths. And every time something comes up, we try to add facts to help people understand what really is the truth, so that it's not only Nextdoor that tells them what's going on. It's a tricky situation because I think we don't want to stop that communication, but we can't let it get out of control.
Thank you. And finally, Michael Brownrigg.
Thank you. I wish I were better at social media, to be honest. I tried, but I have a lot going on, and I work, and I am city council. And so I wish I were better at it, to be honest, and I'll try to be better. I think everyone who knows me, and even those who don't know, they can come up and talk to me in Molly Stones or on the sidewalk, and believe me, that happens all the time. So I am approachable, but I'm not all that great at communicating. And again, I'll try to be better. I have refereed forums when things are getting out of hand. It's not my supporters. It's just when I think people are being incivil or uneducated about an issue, I do, with some trepidation, sometimes wade in to try to clarify and dial down the heat. But some people just like to be angry on social media, and there's a part of me that just says there's more important things to do.
Thank you. Another resident wrote in with these quality of life concerns: noise from recology pickup, residential dwellings prior to 7 a.m., street sweepers before 7 a.m., and Caltrain horns. What would you do to mitigate noise issues and prevent recology from beginning prior to 7 a.m.? And in paren, they note, Recology notes that the city ordinance set these rules. So what would you do to prevent Recology from beginning prior to 7 a.m. and minimize street sweeper noise as well? And Caltrain horns prior to 7 a.m. and after 7 p.m. Sleep is of the essence, and other cities, the writer claims other cities have worked with both of these agencies to mitigate noise issues. So Recology before 7 a.m., street sweepers before 7 a.m., and Caltrain horns before 7 a.m. and after 7 p.m. What would you do about that? And we will start with Michael Brownrigg.
Thanks. So street sweepers are completely in our control. We can definitely look at changing those cycles. I mean, frankly, I watched my street sweeper going down the very middle of the street because both sides are parked up, and I wonder why do we even send the street sweeper out? So that's a question. That's a conversation I'm happy to have. I serve on the garbage board, so I'm happy to talk to Recology. But let me tell you what the trade-off is. If you make Recology come later, then first of all, they're gumming up the streets when people are trying to get to work, and you're not getting down a street with a garbage truck on it. Let me tell you, not in Burlingame. And it will also cost us more money because the routes will take longer, and we pay by the amount of time they're out on our streets. So I would be you will find it hard to convince me that we shouldn't start at 6. And the last is train horns, and I would love to kill the train horn noise, and we can do it. They're called safe crossings. We can make that investment if we want to, and I will happily support an effort to do that. So far, there's been not much willingness to look into it for complicated reasons.
Thank you. And next is Peter Stevenson.
Yes. I guess where I live in Lion Hogue, it's more of an issue of them coming late in the day rather than before 7. But I completely understand, and we should work with Recology to enforce the guidelines we've established as a city. If that does lead to increased budget requirements, we at least need to be transparent to the community about that and have them weigh in on whether or not they want to support that. In terms of street sweepers, completely understand it's in our control, and we should just make sure that we're adhering to it. On the Caltrain noise, some of that is federally mandated in terms of safety on the non-commuter lines and things like that. And those are a lot of times the horns you hear in the middle of the night. But I do think we should at least investigate, as Michael said, some of the safe crossing opportunities. I'm also curious as to whether or not electrification will actually help stem some of that noise, because of the transportation time in and out of a station is much faster. So
thank you.
There you go.
Thank you. And finally, Ricardo Ortiz.
Great, thank you. As far as Recology, we have had complaints, and we contacted Recology, and I believe it was a multifamily building where they were picking up the garbage a little early in the morning, and they did change their time to a little later. But at the end of the day, their answer usually is going to be what Michael just said, which is they need to be there when there's no traffic so that they can get around quicker, and also let traffic go by. On the train horns, we did discuss the safe crossings, and it wasn't clear whether the horns were not going to be required once we had the safe crossing, which is why we never followed up with it. But the one thing we're doing for that'll avoid the train horns is that grade separation. Once those railroad tracks are above the streets, then there will be no need for the horns anymore. So we're working hard on it. We're looking for the money to do the grade separation at Broadway, and then hopefully that will lead to other grade separations, and then we will have no more horns. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's talk about the new districts. Is there anything specific in your district you'd like to address? And also, what will be your governing style with respect to district interests versus overall Burlingame needs? So districts, is there anything specific in your district that you think needs addressing? And what will be your governing style with respect to needs in your district and the overall city's needs? And we will start with Ricardo Ortiz.
Thank you. My district is at the northern end of town and going all the way up the hill. Our the biggest concerns that I have here are usually have to do with the Peninsula Healthcare District project that's going on around the Peninsula Hospital, and what that's going to do to the neighborhood. We're keeping an eye on that, and to make sure that as they propose their project, that we are keeping a good eye on it and make sure it's not going to have a negative impact on the neighborhood. Additionally, the hospital has a helicopter that flies in at all hours of the night. They are not following the proper procedures on that, on the way the helicopters are supposed to be flying in. So we're working with the hospital trying to have them change that. And that is a big deal because it does wake us up in the middle of the night. It gets pretty loud when this thing is landing right next to us. I'm going to have a hard time ignoring the rest of the city, and I'm certainly not going to. I believe that we still have to represent the whole city. Thank you.
Thank you. And next is Michael Brownrigg.
Yeah, I was not a fan of districts. I argued against district elections, and I still don't like district elections for cities of our size. But we were over a barrel with state law and lawsuit, and we didn't have a choice. I won't legislate only for my district. I'll be specific. I really see myself representing the entirety of Burlingame, that I think we have common issues. If there is an issue with a park over in Lion Hogue, I'm going to be shoulder to shoulder with Peter working on that issue. So I hope my colleagues feel the same about my neighborhood, because we do have issues. We have a big, important traffic problem on Alvarado, which I hope tomorrow night we may be able to solve or at least make better. But that's a real concern to a lot of parents with small kids. And then we have a major development that may occur at the Sisters of Mercy. Again, a really big issue for people who live in that neighborhood, but I think an issue that the whole city should care about. So I'm going to keep governing citywide.
Thank you. And finally, Peter Stevenson.
Yeah, I mean, when we get elected, we're voting on issues or dealing with issues or addressing issues that are citywide, and absolutely will represent the city overall. I've always felt that way in terms of the last 30 years of living in Burlingame. But that being said, I think it's important, whether you are supportive of districts or not, my governance style is really to reach out and to make communications accessible and accessible. I've been doing town halls, even though I'm running unopposed, essentially. I think it's important to have access to your city council, regardless of what the issue is or what the timing is. And I want to hear from people. So that's how I've always kind of operated in my community volunteer capacity, and I'll continue to do that, whether it's continue the town halls even after the election, whether it's periodic walking the precincts just to hear the voice of the residents, whether it's community forums and participating. There is one issue that I was not aware of from the standpoint of
but we're going to have to cut you off there, Peter.
No worries, but I'll save it for later because it is something I want to ask Ricardo and Michael about.
Okay, deal. Our next question is, what will you do to make the city safer for pedestrians and bicyclists? How will you work to encourage sustainable transportation in the city? What would you do to help make the city safer for pedestrians and bicyclists? How will you work to encourage sustainable transportation in Burlingame? And we'll start with Ricardo Ortiz.
Great, thank you. We have many initiatives throughout the city that are traffic calming initiatives that are going to slow down cars and allow for more space for bicycles and pedestrians, particularly on California Drive, where we recently had an accident with a fatality. I think it's important that we look at that street, and particularly that intersection, because there is just issues with speed but I think we're doing that as part of our master plan for a bicycle pedestrian master plan. California Drive is the next place that we're going to focus on, and then there's many others.
Thank you. And next is Peter Stevenson.
Yeah, as I said, I'm a very strong proponent of sustainable mobility concept. I think there's a lot we can learn from communities around the world about how to address these types of issues. Most of the traditional approach around, for example, pedestrian and bicycle safety is to figure out how we protect them from the cars that are going back and forth and that type of issue. And that's certainly continue that importance and having safe crossings and that, or areas designated for bicycles. But we also need to think a little bit more creatively, because we have a lot of streets where we're trying to have all three forms of transportation on one thoroughfare. Whereas, trying to like keep cars in accessible right regions for cars, but not think about it as potential areas for maybe pedestrian only or bicycle only, and rethinking about how we route cars in and around the city more safely. So definitely need to take a comprehensive approach and kind of think creatively and out of the box on this.
Thank you. And finally, Michael Brownrigg.
Thank you. And also just to acknowledge, there are a couple of questions in the chat, just to know that they're there. So really important. We're working on it. I think the two very significant initiatives are what Ricardo alluded to on California Drive. So we're gonna put that on a road diet, and instead of it being 4 lanes of people driving 35, 40, 45 miles an hour, which they shouldn't be, but they are, we'll turn it down to 3 lanes, 1 in each direction, and then a left turn lane. That'll slow traffic significantly and allow for bike lanes, dedicated bike lanes. On El Camino Real, we have a very large redevelopment program in place, or being worked on with Caltrans. That will now produce safe sidewalks that are not rolling, accidents waiting to happen for pedestrians. And I think that's going to be a dramatic improvement in pedestrian safety. And then we just have to keep our eye on the ball. And one thing I've always tried to do is encourage our traffic and safety commissioners to not be bashful about suggesting improvements.
Thank you. And I will ask the question in the chat, since we've all seen it. Normally we disable the chat so that the candidates don't see the questions, but that didn't happen tonight. And given that these districts are not opposed, we're allowing a little more leeway in terms of time on the questions, et cetera. So this is a good question, though. What are your thoughts on Caltrans redoing all of El Camino Real, the main artery through Burlingame? What would you change, and what do you like best about it? So what are your thoughts on the Caltrans work on El Camino Real, one of your main arteries, and what would you change, and what do you like best about it? And we'll start with Peter Stevenson.
I'm not sure I fully understand the question about rerouting. Is that meaning?
No, redoing, not
okay,
rerouting.
So there is an initiative underway with Caltrans, PG&E, and the city and Planning Commission around what they call ECR, and that's being done. I think that's important work, not just for safety of pedestrians and improve drainage in those areas. But I also think, it's important to keep some of the elements of that plan addressing, what is unique about that section of VCR as it goes through from the northern end of Burlingame through into San Mateo. So there is a pretty comprehensive plan for public viewing on through the website, and I would encourage everybody to look at that.
Thank you. And next is Ricardo Ortiz.
Thank you. The plan is a compromise to allow us to continue to have trees, but improve safety and improve the sidewalks, improve the streets. Like Peter said, we have issues with flooding in the winter. We have sidewalks that are completely torn apart, as Michael mentioned, and people, tripping hazards. And then the street itself is very bumpy. I've always said one of the best things we can do to improve the quality of life in Burlingame is to fix El Camino. I think that the discussions with Caltrans have brought us a long, long way. I don't think if I proposed what is being proposed right now, when I first got elected, I don't think it would have gone over very well. And it's taking a little while for public opinion to catch up. We have a plan which will allow us to retain the canopy, but allow for streets to be safer and be able to be repaired. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Michael Brownrigg.
Yeah, I'll be a little more blunt. I served on the working group and I helped get this whole initiative started. And I want to honor the work that Bobby Benson did on the citizen committee to help us get to this compromise with Caltrans. So it is going to be a dramatic redevelopment of El Camino Real, at the end of which we will have a beautiful tree-lined street. But many of the big trees are going to have to come out to make this happen. And so what we needed to do with Caltrans is to make sure we could plant enough trees of the right species that our kids would enjoy the same canopy that we have. And that's something that we've achieved. It's going to be a safe road, a road with drainage, a road with 10-foot sidewalks on both sides for pedestrians and for the occasional cyclist, even if they're not supposed to do that. And it's going to be beautiful. It is going to be a big change. It's going to be $140 million investment by the state. And I think it was, that the issue with trees the size that they are, at the age that they are, is that tragedies can happen if you don't take care of them.
Thank you.
Undergrounding.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
undergrounding, yes, and undergrounding the utilities. That's also part of this.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, one last question. Everybody has their strengths and weaknesses and skills and such. What's your special talent that you will bring to this office? Why is it needed? Or, in other words, what's your superpower and why is it needed for Burlingame? And we will start with Michael.
So I like to think of my superpower, such as it is, of being a couple of things. One, I'm pretty good at getting people to come together, even on issues that they might not think they agree on. And two, I'm pretty good at putting finance to work in a way that is creative. So when we redid Burlingame Avenue and we created those beautiful wide sidewalks, that was a $16 million project that didn't take $1 out of our general fund. We did it through a combination of using our sewer money because we were tearing the streets up anyway, raising parking meters by a small amount. And then we asked the landowners on Burlingame Avenue, if this is such a good idea, presumably it'll make your property more valuable. Are you willing to pitch in? And they polled themselves and they did. So they put in about a third, parking meters a third, and the sewer money about a third, not a dollar out of our general fund. And look what we got. I like solutions like that. I like solutions like our affordable housing and parking structure. And I think in these days of limited resources, it's more important than ever to be creative.
Thank you. And next is Peter Stevenson.
I think I've always prided myself on being a connector, bringing different, perspectives together and setting up a transparent, but productive environment for progress or decisions to be made. Whether it's in my professional life or whether it's in my community volunteer work, I've always been prideful of my ability to create direction from complexity. Sometimes complexity can create basically no movement and paralysis around something, which is oftentimes could be dangerous when you think about a community context. So those are what I would say. And, to do that, I certainly have to listen and feel approachable. So I echo Michael's comments as well.
Thank you. And finally, Ricardo Ortiz.
Thank you. I would say my superpower, my ability is as a mayor, I really enjoy running the meetings, trying to keep people on track, trying to get the issues moving forward. Yeah. And so we do have this thing called the Brown Act that we have to live by. And so I pride myself in keeping on schedule, keeping the meetings moving and letting everybody have their say. And I think that is really my strength, is I know how to work well with people through my nonprofits that I worked forever and ever before I did the city council. And now through regional boards, I've been chair of a couple of the regional boards. And I think we've been very successful in moving the needle without stepping on a lot of toes. I think I've been able to bring my colleagues on board and work well with them. And I think that we will continue to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, it's time for closing statements. And while the candidates are gathering their thoughts, I will just briefly mention that you can find additional information about the candidates on the League's Voters Edge website. That's votersedge.org. All the candidates have been invited to enter their information and link to their own websites. All right, so we will start with closing statements, and we will start with Michael Brownrigg.
Thank you again to the league for bringing us together. Thanks to the members of the public for sticking with us. I know I appreciate it. You know, for me, it's an honor to serve you and to serve my neighborhood and all of our residents. I know everyone in Burlingame wants the city to stay the wonderful place it is, but also adapt and grow and accommodate people, a wide variety of people with different means. And I think that's generally appreciated. We live in an amazing part of California and an amazing part of the world. We are the home of biotech industry, semiconductors, internet, telecom, software. So there are going to be pressures as this region grows, but I think our city is uniquely suited and situated to deal with those pressures, to continue to have a high quality of life, to continue to have beautiful single family home neighborhoods. Maybe they get a little bit more crowded with ADUs, but I think it's still going to be the same great safe streets with beautiful trees and parks. We just have to keep it going, and we have to work together, and we need to make sure that we keep our eye on what's the most important thing about our city. And that, I think, is what I've said before, is the fact that we welcome everybody, that we look forward, that we anticipate problems. We are one of the first cities to have a sea level rise defense strategy. We are the first city to adopt zoning rules on sea level rise defense. We're always thinking ahead, and what the council has been, and I think it will continue to be, is a council that is very careful with public money. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, but we managed to borrow money for the community center at the lowest historic interest rates ever. And we took the community center offline during COVID. So, again, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. I look forward to serving this city, these people, and this wonderful place for 4 more years.
Thank you. And next closing statement is Peter Stevenson.
Thank you, Margie and Carolyn, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for putting this together. I want to applaud the 2 council members that are here and the efforts they've done on behalf of Burlingame. And I know both Ricardo and Michael for a long time and know the effort that they've put in. Personally, I'm very excited about representing Burlingame and running for City Council in District 5. As a longtime resident, I think I know pretty well what makes Burlingame really special. And at the core of that is really community, and community of all types and all likes, all areas across that. And so I certainly want to protect that as much as possible, but I also recognize that change is somewhat inevitable. I've seen it in Lion Hogue over the last 30 years as well. So I think it requires thoughtful leadership. I think it requires transparent decision-making. I think it requires creative solutions to complex issues. And I will actively work hard to, guide that path forward along with the rest of the council if I'm elected. I care deeply about this community. I never thought I would, because there's always a place on the freeway that I passed with the old exterminator statue sitting out on the highway, and the Burlingame sign saying 26,000 residents. But when I got here, I absolutely fell in love with Burlingame, and I care deeply about it. And I will work tirelessly to help guide the future for our community. And I appreciate your support. Thank you.
And finally, Ricardo Ortiz.
Okay, thank you, Margie, and thank you, Carolyn, and the League of Women Voters for sponsoring our event. I also want to thank our city clerk, Megan Hasleshare, who's still on here, setting us up and everything. We've done a lot in the last 9 years since I've been elected to council. We have a lot more to do. I have on my list is Top Golf. We have the El Camino repairs. We have their grade separation on Broadway. We have our Bayfront, where vacant buildings are being converted into state-of-the-art biotech office buildings. I want to see our hotel recover. And I want to see continue our progress in the city and continue to guide it so that we maintain our quality of life and maintain our traditional neighborhoods. I thank you all for the opportunity to serve for another 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Carolyn, could you share our slides, please? And while she's doing that, I would like to also thank Megan Hasleshare. She actually did the lion's share of the work to set this up and make this happen. We just kind of come in and make it work and make it look easy. The important thing is to remember to vote on or before November 8th. You should be getting your ballot. If you don't already, you should be getting it today or so in the mail. I got mine yesterday over here in Half Moon Bay. So you can return it a few ways. You can just stick it right in the envelope, which you should not forget to sign, and put it back in the mail. You can use a county drop box, which are in various locations all over the county. Or you can visit a vote center, which is especially important if you mar your ballot or something and need to swap it or have any questions. The vote centers are a great place to work through any issues, and you can find all those locations at the San Mateo County Elections website, which is on the screen. And whatever you do, do not forget to sign your ballot. Our next slide is there's more information available to the voters. You should have received a sample ballot. You also will get an official voter information guide, which is mailed to register voters. The league has easy voter guides, which are online and probably in your local library. And then there's the website at votersedge.org. And finally, join the league. If the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization and membership is open to people of all genders, age 16 and up. Join us. If you're interested in helping your community with forums such as these, go to the League of Women Voters website, lwv.org. And now finally, running for office and serving your city is a hard and thankless job. And please join me in applauding and thanking the candidates for running and working for the city of Burlingame City Council. Thank you all. And I think I'm taking it out. So thank you all and good night.
Good night,
Everyone,
thank you. Good night.
good night.